Hey, Chamber members, Alan Waters here, your Director of Marketing and Communications at the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce and your Words of Wisdom podcast. Today, I'm joined by
Michael Gallagher, MK Leadership.
And Kristin Gallagher, MK Leadership.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here. So the very first question I ask everybody is, what does success mean to you? And so obviously with two guests, I'm going to have you answer it separately. But this doesn't just have to be professional life. It can be personal life as well. So Michael, what does success mean to you?
Well, gosh, I think everybody has their own definition of success. But for me, it's if I can, at the end of each day, say that I have made a positive impact in someone's life or in the community, then that's a success.
All right. And for Kristin, for you, what does success mean to you?
I think for me, it's similar. It's definitely, we want to make an impact on people. But for me also, it's that feeling inside with what you're doing brings you joy and that you enjoy what you're doing day in and day out.
Okay. And how did you end up there with that being your feelings for success? Because I think it's something that changes so drastically as people go through their careers and go through their lives. I can speak for myself that when I was graduating high school, a lot of it was like, oh, I want to make this amount of money and I want to be able to do this, and that would be success to me. But as I've gotten older, obviously that has shifted and changed. So for you, what has kind of led to this being the current version of success?
Do you mind me taking that one
Absolutely.
first?
Sure.
Go for it.
So my background is law enforcement. So I was in law enforcement for 13 years. And during that career, I realized I needed something outside of my job, because you see a lot of law enforcement when they retire, they're then trying to grasp, what do I do next? Because that was their full identity. And so what I did is I got into direct sales. And on the surface, it a lot of people, I don't think they understand everything that goes into direct sales. They just see like a Tupperware party or something of that aspect. For me, I learned a lot about myself. I learned about being an entrepreneur and the idea that you want to surround yourself by the 5 people that you want to be like. And so for me, that turned into authors. So it was Rachel Hollis, Mel Robbins, Brene Brown. And I got that mindset that I'm made for more. It's more than just my title, but it's what are we doing in the world? And when I started being around those types of people, then I got that feeling that, okay, my job title isn't what's bringing me joy. There's something more in this world and a bigger way that I can make an impact than what I'm doing in my day job.
And to continue on that, as far as how I determine how it defines success is really my growth journey, and realizing that success is not a destination. It becomes a continuous process. And when I started my journey, I became the director of public works for a township, and I had my first opportunity for true leadership. I had a situation where a supervisor was so toxic I had to deal with it. And I realized, hey, wait a second, he was never taught to be a leader. And I realized, well, no one's really taught to be a leader, right? It's we go to school and we study what we're intending to study. We get our jobs and we learn how to do the task. And then when you learn how to do the task really well, then you get promoted to leadership. And then so many leaders kind of, without those soft skills to learn about communication and empathy, that it becomes a real struggle sometimes. And so my realization that, okay, this is a continuous growth journey that everybody needs to continually grow themselves.
Yeah, and the source of that question comes from, I had a friend who had a podcast very similar that he focused on success, and it was for theater industry people. And so often in that industry, you'll hear someone say, oh, I want to make it to Broadway. And then if they made it to Broadway, he was like, well, then what? Because if you set your goal on a specific, it's this or nothing, when you achieve that, you leave yourself kind of floundering because you don't know, similar to what you said, you don't know where you're going from there. So yeah, I agree with you. I definitely think it's something that you've got to keep working towards. Otherwise, you're going to hit that moment of just, well, what now?
Well, and to add to that too, it's not even if and when you hit the success, What if you don't?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many people on stage that love what they do and they haven't made it to Broadway.
That's true.
But they love the careers and the impacts they're making.
Mm-hmm. I think if you're not willing to see success as something that is ever shifting, you're pigeonholing yourself in a way that's not going to be beneficial in the long term. And you're going to miss out on a lot of good opportunities because you say, but that's not what I wanted. That's not where I was going for. So in that same vein, when you graduated high school, what was the trajectory at that point? What were you like, this is what I want to do? And how has that kind of led you to where you are now?
So out of high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I love math and science, and so I decided I'm going to pursue an engineering degree. And so even with that, I didn't like what kind of engineer. There's so many types of engineers, and so I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of chose a broad aspect of engineering called civil engineering, which is, there's many things within civil engineering. But so I chose civil engineering, which led me to becoming a professional engineer. And that led me to going into the public sector and being promoted into leadership as a public works director. And that led me to an incredible growth journey. Along with Kristin, we kind of, we've been growing together and helping each other grow. But that growth journey and understanding, oh my gosh, leadership is so important. Mm-hmm. And moving here to the NRV now 2 years ago, we moved here. We decided that we really wanted to make an impact to the community and work and then start the MK leadership. Mm-hmm. So.
And I feel like this was one I'm really interested because going from high school law enforcement to where you are now, that is a big shift, I think.
Well,
so
even before high school, and that's why looking back, I don't even know how I ended up in law enforcement. I think it's very interesting because I was a very artsy student. Mm. And I think I ended up in my career because I did what I was supposed to do. I did the should do's. My dad was a federal employee. My mom was a teacher. So I was raised in that traditional, you get a good job that has good benefits. And so that was, at the time, my career goal was get a government job with the government benefits. And in high school, I was an artist. I loved theater. I loved the graphic arts. I wanted to be an artist. But I was told, well, you can't really make a career out of that. So I shifted. And in grad school or in undergrad, I studied public administration and criminal justice because I loved law and order. So who doesn't want to do that? And that's what really took me into the field of law enforcement. I loved the investigative side of it. Mm-hmm. But then I hit a point in my career where it was frustrating because law enforcement, unfortunately, is reactive and you're getting into the situations after bad things have already happened. Mm-hmm. So I also have a background in forensic psychology, and that kind of showed me that there's a path that we see and there's a way for us to help people before the bad stuff happens. And so along our kind of growth journey, I started shifting my mindset of I don't want to do what I should be doing because on paper, my career was amazing. So a lot of people thought I was crazy to leave the DC area and come down to Blacksburg, but we just felt that that was the right thing for our family. And it was like a wake-up moment that we don't have to stay in DC. For a long time, I thought I had to stay in DC because that's where the jobs are. That's ridiculous. There's jobs everywhere across the country, across the world. So we just made the decision that, okay, what do we want for our family? What's the life that we envision, day-to-day activities? And it was being outdoors and closer to Smith Mountain Lake and being in the mountains, and that brought us to Blacksburg. And so it's more, again, building that life around what feels right. Instead of doing what you should be doing.
What you're supposed to. And I'm going to butcher the whole piece, but I know there's a story that Jim Carrey told where, his dad went along those safe routes. I think he was an accountant or something along that. And then he was let go. And that was the turning point for him where he was like, well, he did the safe thing and he still saw the negative.
Exactly.
So why shouldn't I follow what my path is and find my own way? I'm always risking that something might happen. But that risk is inherent no matter what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, the job industry changes. So as you're doing that and you're talking about family and you're talking about some of those pieces as well, how do you make sure you're balancing your personal life, your family time with work, especially when you're in a business where there's so much about being a business owner where you almost are not really allowed by society to be off. How do you make sure you keep that balance in place?
Gosh, that's the $1 million question, isn't
right?
it?
Yep. It's one of those that there's probably never one answer.
For me, whenever I hear the phrase balance, I just want to smash that immediately. I don't think that exists.
Okay.
I don't think you can realistically balance, because that would mean that everything gets equal attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's making priorities and creating boundaries. And so one of the things when we've started this growth journey and then moved down to Blacksburg, in my mind at least, I still have a day job on top of the business. And it's creating boundaries within my 8-hour shift to get things that will fulfill me as a person, fulfill me as a mother, as a wife, and as a business owner. And so just making the time and then realizing that you can't do everything.
Right.
So it's delegating. And that's where actually the ladies last night, we had a little get together and they asked, how do I do it all? And I was like, it's Mike. I have a partner who helps support the things I want to do. And vice versa. It's we work as a team and delegate, and we just make decisions that sometimes we don't clean the bathroom. Like, what can we not do so that we can do something else that's more important?
Yeah. Delegation is, on my professional development journey, that is something that I know I struggle with. I really struggle handing things off because there's a certain way that I like to do it, or there's a certain trust factor. So how do you build that trust factor and also kind of on your own set of terms realize, okay, great, if I'm going to delegate, I do have to let it go. So how do you reach that point?
That's really tough for like a perfectionist type person, because that's the type of person that if it has to be a certain way. And I think being able to give people grace to do it their way and be happy with it is a learning journey, I guess, because that's hard to do, but it's necessary, and you have to live with other people's mistakes and not hold it over their heads.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I'm a big believer that as a leader, when there's successes, I think it's a team oriented thing. When something goes right, to me, it's always we. But when something goes wrong, even if it's something I've delegated and it's not what I would have done, to me, it falls back on you as a leader to say, that's my responsibility. So how do you also balance that with the delegation part of, okay, great, this isn't the way I would have done it. Moving forward, how do you make sure you keep those aspects without it becoming, okay, these mistakes are happening regularly? How do you do that and approach that as a leader?
I think in a coaching way, not in a way to, if somebody makes a mistake and it gets past, it goes past the finish line, or, goes out there as a mistake, you have a conversation about it and you explain, it's okay that this happened. But how can we not do that in the future? How can we make this better in the future? And in that process, be able to, if you as the leader kind of know what should have happened, you can coach them and explain to them and saying, maybe we can try this next time. What do you think about that? Always kind of include them in that sort of discussion.
And I think my experience as a project manager and overseeing different types of projects throughout my career, it's addressing the what can we do better, even if things don't go wrong per se, but always after a big project, look back and say, okay, we accomplished this. What went right? What went wrong? How can we make it better or easier next time? And as long as you do that as a team and have team involvement, then there's more buy-in.
Yeah, I refer to that as a post-mortem, that you're coming together and you're doing those aspects.
It's such a sad way. I call it an after action.
Okay, yeah, different. I don't know why for me, that came about through the theater world. We call it a post-mortem, and I was like, this isn't
That's
even
so
what
dark.
we call it in our industry. So
unless you're a medical examiner, you can.
Right, yeah, exactly. All right, so before we hit our ad break here, we've been talking a lot and we haven't really discussed what MK Leadership is. So could you give us a brief overview of MK Leadership?
So MK Leadership, we are a company that does coaching, mentoring. We do inspirational events in leadership.
And it's really everything we've been talking about right now is we want to share what we've learned about how to live the life that makes you feel fulfilled. So we help those that are already growth-minded. They just don't know which direction to go. They have that feeling that I want to do more, but how? And so we're both certified Maxwell leadership trainers. So we bring a lot of that into it, but it's also our experience from the leadership world. And we've had the good and the bad examples, and most people only have the bad. And so I love that I have a good example from my past that I can speak to and tell people this really does exist. Like good leaders, good managers are out there. We just have to start showing it. And I think that's a lot of what's lacking in the corporate world, at least, and I think the government, we talk about that all the time of being the good example. Like we need to set a good example in the community.
And so what came about with launching MK Leadership? Like, what was there? I know you talked about leaving DC and making those decisions. Was there anything that was like, all right, this is the trajectory we want to follow? That was the inspiration behind it? Or was it just one of those things where you realized you had the skill set and so the company came along with the skill set?
I know for me, it was the realization that leadership is something that is a skill that is not taught. And I remember when I went through the certification process with the Maxwell leadership team, I mean, I had an inspiration of purpose, being like, oh my gosh, where has this been my whole life? I need to teach this. And that's kind of what has driven me. And, and Kristin has a similar path.
Awesome. Well, we're going to take this quick break. And when we get back, I want to talk a little bit more about leadership and some of the skills that go into leadership that you and your experiences have seen may be lacking, or ways that people can start working on those, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. Coming this fall from MK Leadership, Live to Lead NRV 2024. Live to Lead NRV is a transformative event designed to inspire and empower you to lead with purpose, passion, and impact in every aspect of your life. Gain the skills and knowledge you need to lead and contribute to a greater purpose. Learn from national and local world-class leadership experts. Live to Lead NRV is a unique opportunity to connect with and learn from local leaders who are making a real impact in our community. This in-person development day will bring leadership principles to life, showing you how they apply in your own backyard and providing a platform for meaningful networking and collaboration. You will leave ready to implement your own personal action plan and lead with renewed passion and commitment. For more information, reach out to Michael at mkleadership.net. That's Michael, Michael, at mkleadership.net. Now back to the episode. All right, so we're back, and yeah, for me, leadership is something that obviously there are many different ways that someone can be a leader. But for you, what is the difference between a leader, a manager, and a boss?
Well, I think that's easy. So, and we always say with MK leadership has nothing to do with your title. It's you as an individual. And so that's one of our, it's funny, we try not to use the word leadership when we talk about our company, even though it's in the company name, but it really comes down to you as an individual in the community or in your family profile. Like, you don't have to be in a corporate setting or have a job title of director of whatever to be considered a leader. And that's coming from the government. Sometimes that's hard because we call the upper management leadership. when in my mind, sometimes they're not the best leaders. They've just been promoted to management. A manager is someone who manages people. So their job is to oversee people. That doesn't mean they're going to lead them, because to be a leader, you have to set an example that someone's going to follow. And then a boss, I think, is similar of a manager. It's just someone who gives out orders. But again, it doesn't mean that they're setting the example that someone wants to follow.
Yeah. I saw a description of it one time that said, sometimes management, sometimes boss, but there's an authority aspect to it that deems a certain level of respect, but that doesn't mean that they are going to march into battle and you're going to follow them.
Yes.
A leader could be, a leader could be someone who's the custodian for the company. It could be the receptionist. It's just a matter of who people in that office gravitate towards, and when the times get tough, who do they look towards? So yeah, and I mean, good hearing that. For you, Mike, what do you think from your experiences in things like public works, going to your experiences on the leadership in New River Valley as a dean? What have you seen as people are trying to make themselves more a leader in this community? Are the things the skills they're kind of like picking up along the way?
Well, so one of the taglines for MK Leadership is that leadership is not about positions, titles, or flowcharts. It's about one life influencing another. And so when I saw some leadership experiences in my career when, people are assigned a title like a supervisor, and, they're supposed to be leading people when they're kind of being dictators, which, that is a form of influence, right? But that's certainly not a good influence. But
right.
So, being a good leader with influence would be somebody that can easily trust, can communicate, can show empathy, can empower. That's a huge thing for leaders to do, is be able to, help lift the other people up, and not be the one that's always at the top of the, pile holding the flag. So, you have to lift your other people up to do that.
So for someone who's working in a company and someone who's hoping to one day become a leader themselves and is looking for someone as a mentor, as a coach, what are some signs or things that they should be on the lookout that they may not be following behind someone who is leading them in the right direction? Because I think many people can look, and you mentioned earlier that the bad examples, we don't always realize that it is a bad leadership until we've already gotten to the first battle. So what are some things that you think people should just be kind of on the lookout for and think about themselves as they're becoming leaders that you would just recommend, hey, maybe avoid and do that? Because again, every leader can be different, but I definitely think there's some signs that we could potentially see of I'm heading in the wrong direction.
I think one thing is if a leader's actions don't match their words, then you can, they may speak a great game, but if you don't see that from them, then, you're not going to really learn from them.
Right.
And I would also say that if you don't feel valued as a person by your leader, then they're not demonstrating good leadership skills for you to follow.
Yeah, I think that's very important I'm just having flashbacks to in law enforcement. It's understanding that each individual comes with their own baggage, their own backstory, their own home life. And so you can't expect everyone to act the same, because we're all human. So you need to be able to give a little flexibility. And you had talked about everyone does projects differently, and it's the same thing. Some people they have a different working genius. They're going to approach a project in a different way. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just different.
Right.
And so that's one of the good leaders that I've had. He took a personal interest in us, and he knew what was going on in our personal lives, and then also wanted to support us as individuals, which that you don't see a lot. A lot of people get protective and they want to keep their workforce, but this leader, this boss, was very interested and invested in making sure that what do you want to do in your career, and would make sure that I got to do those types of activities that help support what interested me.
I could not agree more on the personal life thing, because one of the first examples I think I had of a moment where I was too young to fully realize it, but looking back, I could go and say that was not someone that I should have been following. Is we had an issue where we had an intern coming in and they were struggling because they needed more hours in order to make their rent. And that was something that we had to work on. If we couldn't give more hours, they needed more flexibility to be able to take on other roles so that they could make their rent. And they told me, the leadership at the time told me, well, that's not really our problem. And I was like, no, but it is. Yeah. If someone's not taken care of personally, we can't expect them to give us any kind of focus or attention, because they're going to be going through their own struggles. And I also am someone who believes that I can never expect someone who's coming in as an employee level to have the same kind of dedication to a company that an owner or a leader will have, because they're not getting the same kind of buy-in. So along those lines, what are your thoughts on that as you've got someone coming brand new into the workforce to make sure that you are providing those opportunities so that they can have that buy-in?
I think it's communication and developing that rapport. Because again, coming in when I first met this boss, I mean, he was my boss, so I didn't really know his personality, and he was so open sometimes that I was on edge, because I had been in an environment where you don't trust your leaders. If you tell them you have a problem, they could use it against you in your schedule or something like that. And so it threw me off. But then when I realized he genuinely did care and I'd open up more, then he offered me more opportunities. And so I think it's building that rapport and showing them that you're authentic. And like what Mike said, your actions have to match what you're saying as well. But once you have that rapport, and then give them that leeway, and still it's difficult though, because then you still have to make sure it's fair.
Right.
Because that's the other issue I've seen, is that you make accommodations for one person, and then others are like, well, that's just because I have kids doesn't mean I want to work this shift kind of mentality. And so it's, how do you address that so that everyone still feels appreciated? But you do have that flexibility for some people that might need additional accommodations.
Right. Because it's not always equal as it is at times equitable.
Yes. Yeah.
So what kind of role do you believe responsibility lies within leadership? Obviously, I feel like many times when we talk about leadership and you see leadership, people have that aspect of, oh, it's a boss and it's those, and there's certain responsibilities that come with that. But in thinking about the fact that anyone can be a leader, what do you look at with responsibility on their plates that you see, oh, okay, that's someone who's a strong leader, who is a good leader?
I think in aspects of responsibility that the leader has to, you'd say that the buck stops here. Like, the leader has to be the ultimate bearer of adversity and to protect their staff, even if it's a mistake that happened within the staff, because that builds trust. And if people feel comfortable that knowing that, I'm not going to, fire's not going to rain down on me because something happened, and that, we're going to learn from this. So the leader who can see, like, I got this, it's okay, can develop that trust within their staff. I mean, you'll be amazed what the staff would then feel empowered to do and grow to do, is when they are not fearing having to, walk on eggshells, or just fearing simple mistakes.
Knowing that someone's kind of got your back.
Yeah.
No matter what's going on. But as a leader, how do you make sure that you're not overdoing that? Where does the line get drawn between, I'm taking the responsibility, I'm protecting my staff or protecting those around me that look to me, versus I'm starting to coddle people and I'm taking away from their level of responsibility? Sure.
I think there has to be a level of accountability and a moment of learning that has to happen, a moment of growth that has to happen, because mistakes shouldn't be repeated, right? And so or the same mistakes should
Right.
be repeated, I guess, right? And so if you can develop a way to hold people accountable without destroying their character, destroying their person, and be able to build them up then too. But make sure that it's like, okay, this happened. Let's figure out what happened. Let's not let this happen again.
Yeah.
And what did we learn from here?
Yeah, because everybody's going to make mistakes. Just this past, past as of the time of recording, I had an issue with the newsletter where I sent it out with the wrong link or the wrong time. Those things happen, but it's a matter of accepting it too. I feel like if you make a mistake, there's not a problem with being able to say, okay, I did this. And I like you said, here's how I can fix it, or, hey, how can I work on this? I'm one of those people that 2 times, if it happens, it's a mistake. After the 3rd point, it's either negligence or it's a choice. Looking at leadership, looking at those pieces as well, what are things that you think people should start kind of working on if they want to find themselves in a leadership role? I'm an 18-year-old student. I've just started in my first quote unquote adult job. What am I on the lookout for of, okay, this is how I can start and one day become a leader? Are there any tips, tricks, things that you'd recommend?
Communication skills, 100%. I think we're getting to a generation where we spend so much time online and on our devices that people don't know how to speak face to face anymore. And they don't know how to deal with difficult people. And so that's actually a title of a class that I have attended as a supervisor, was how to deal with difficult people. Because a lot of people don't want to confront conflict. And so that's where you see a lot of management get into trouble, is they have an issue and they're like, oh, that makes me real uncomfortable. I don't want to talk about that. So they just don't address it. And that's just going to amplify your issues in your organization, or even personal issues at home. Like that could destroy marriages and friendships if you don't address what's going on. And so I think learning to communicate, which means listening and speaking and reading the body languages and all of the aspects of communication, I think is a big skill that we need to work on as a community.
I think something else is being a continuous learner. That might be tough for an 18-year-old just out of college to tell. Because I remember when I graduated and finishing engineering school, and then I took my PE exam. I'm like, man, I'm never studying again.
Right.
Or, I'm done learning. And that was like, you're never done learning.
Right. Yeah.
But to have a habit of continually growing in yourself, personally, professionally, emotionally, that would be key to, becoming a leader.
And do you think this is a thought I have that I'm often torn on? Do you think leadership is something that someone can work towards in the sense of like setting a goal to become a leader, or do you think leadership is something that is more thrust upon you? To me, it's something that can be both, but just in general, when do you know when someone is looking for leadership for selfish reasons versus someone who is ready to be a leader, I guess?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah. I think it almost seems like who seems like genuine, right? Versus who's working really hard, but there's a distrust, or there's a disingenuous nature. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but I think a genuine person, and that goes to our belief that leadership is a lifestyle. It's not, it's who you are as a person. So that being genuine is going to show. You're going to see it.
Yeah, the actions will define it. And I think that's thinking back to when I first started going for my promotions in my career. I think it was because I saw what my managers, supervisors were doing, and I'm like, I can do this better. And so it was almost like a competition. Like, I think I can be better at this and help the people in my organization. And so I think those, if they have the true intentions and are authentic, they're looking out for the better good of the organization. It's not an individual goal. It's, I want to make the organization or the community a better place.
Yeah. And to me, that's also where it kind of goes back to that leader versus manager aspect, because I've seen people that are really, really great at their job be promoted to a management position, and then they flounder and they struggle because people don't see leadership and frankly, they don't see management as its own separate skill. They think, oh, they're great at the job, they're going to be great at showing and telling other people how to do the job, but that doesn't always translate. So you mentioned briefly earlier the working genius. Tell us a little bit more about that, because let's get into it, and then I'll tell you my piece on it. So
I said, do you want to give like the official version, or I can give my...
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So my experience from Working Genius is Mike was doing the training. He's technically from our team. He's the certified trainer in that aspect. But I was over listening to it, and just the intro to what the Working Genius is. It breaks it down in 6 geniuses. And what they say is there's 6 geniuses total to get a project from start to end. But you're typically 2 of them are your geniuses, and then you have 2 that are your frustrations. And as I'm listening to it, I'm realizing this is why I can't get stuff done at work. And so I went back and listened to the whole book, because you can get the audio book or written book. And listening to it, it changed how I approached my projects with work. And I partner up with people that fill in where my frustrations are. So I'm an idea person. I love coming up with ideas. But then actually taking action on the ideas, that's where I'm just like, I don't want to do that. And then being the cheerleader and getting people to work with you, I'm good at that, but it drains me.
Yeah.
So I need someone that can help me. Like, I can do it for a little bit, but then I need someone else to come in. And so that's where I just think of, I have an annual project with work, and one of my colleagues, we realized we were opposites, which made it perfect, because I would come up with the idea, she would draft the products, I would go back and review them, and then she would hit send to finalize, because she wanted to check it off her list. And so it was like having that type of partnership really helped us get from beginning to end. Otherwise, I would just sit there and think of ideas all day long and get nothing done. I don't know if Mike can add to that.
Sure. Yeah. So the Working Genius is an awesome framework for working on with yourself, or especially for teams, because what it does is it identifies areas where you're strong, or it's more of not necessarily strength. It's really what you get joy out of.
Right.
What actually gives you energy when you do it, and that would be a genius, versus a frustration, was things you're doing that are actually draining you. And what it can identify is, it can identify, a lot of people might feel guilty about, something about their job, that they're, oh my gosh, I'm not doing this right. I'm not good at this. I'm not competent. When it's their frustration is draining you. And once you realize that, it's like, oh, okay. It's not, I'm not flawed not flawed in that way. And then, it can help you, avoid projecting judgment on others, because for that same reason, you can see somebody else who's like, what are they, lazy? It's like, no, they're not lazy. They're working in their frustration. And as a leader, if you can identify that and then be creative and say, well, let's not blow up the whole organizational structure, but how can you, Alan, how can we adjust your job where you're working more in your genius and less in your frustration, and how you see you flourish, and be and as the team develops that, the team is like working like a great running machine.
Yeah, able to work better together. So for you, what are your geniuses, frustrations? What are those for you?
I think the terminology better than I do, because I know it's for the first two, it's like the coming up with the ideas. They say you live in the clouds, and that's 100% me. Like I could come up with project ideas, business ideas all day long. Like
that's the
where,
wonder.
Yeah, I like to wonder and think, well, how could we do this better? How could we improve this? Or what could fill this gap that we have? I think that's another one of the, so like right next to it is identifying what needs to be done.
Invention.
And so as again, I can see the big picture, see where the gaps are. How can we fill that gap? My frustrations, I feel like I need the chart in front of me.
I think one of them is enablement.
Yeah.
Because that's my genius.
Yeah, and that's where, again, as partners, it's great because I'm like, I can come up with the ideas for our events. And then I pass it off to Mike and I'm like, okay, you call these people. Because that's the part that I don't really want to do, is to take the actions and complete the tasks.
And what about you, Mike? What are yours?
So I'm a wonder and enablement are my geniuses.
Okay.
And then invention, oddly enough, as an engineer, is a frustration. And galvanizing people is a frustration.
Okay. That is, so for mine, when I first came and joined the chamber, one of the first things we did is we sat down with Sharon Scott and we went through this program. And I learned a lot about myself through it. And I told Sharon, honestly, after the first, because it was about a 2-hour presentation, start to finish. After the first hour, I was ready to jump ship. Because the first hour to me is all of the wonder aspect. It's describing what this is and how it works and all of that. And wonder is one of my biggest frustrations. And so I told her, I was like, when we were in that part, I was ready to be done. But then when we got into the other aspect and we were learning, I realized how quickly and why I was so frustrated. So the other frustration for me is galvanizing, which, as someone who is in marketing, is
very
kind of an odd thing. Yeah. Marissa asked, she was like, why is that? And for me, it's because my two working geniuses are enablement and invention. And then my working competencies are discernment and tenacity. And the things that I realized and why I'm not great at galvanizing is because I so often live in the world of, I'll invent an idea, I'll have this thought, and then I'll work through and say, okay, well, why wouldn't this work? And then I'll go back, and then why wouldn't this work? So with the time I tell anybody about something, I've worked through the problems. It will work. Just do it. And so I'm not going to tell you why I want you to do it. I'm just like, here's the thing. If you do it, great. If you don't, okay, fine. So that was really interesting to learn, because even the other side, I would have thought discernment was one of my working geniuses, because it's something I do all the time. But that was when it got into, yes, but it's not a joy. You may be good at it. You may be good at some of your frustrations, but that doesn't mean that you are happy doing it. And so that was mind-opening for me. So how is that something, and looking at the kind of classes and the kind of things that you do, how is that something that kind of ties in with MK leadership as a whole?
Well, it's a service that we offer. And I think it's what you learn from it is so transformational. And you can, it can change how you approach life, how you approach work. As a leader, it can approach how you be a leader, change how you be a leader. So,
do you, can you give everybody all the information on where they can find you on social media, website, any of that information?
Every first and third Wednesday of every month is the Breakfast Club, and it's at follow us on Facebook, the Breakfast Club on Facebook. And we're actually going to different locations to have a breakfast. And it's generally a 1-hour informal conversation about a leadership topic. And it's great. People with like-minded people get around the table and they share their experience and their insight. And what I love about situations like that is that people learn from each other. And you realize that, oh, I'm not alone in this situation. And oh, wow, that's a great insight you had. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to connect and learn. So that's the Breakfast Club. The next is we do quarterly events. And coming up in fall is an event called Live to Lead. So stay tuned for a date to come out for Live to Lead in fall here in the New River Valley. Live to Lead is a inspirational experience to learn from world-class leaders as well as local local leaders to talk about various leadership topics and inspiration.
What I like about what we do with Live to Lead is that it's not just it's videos, the inspirational videos from well-known leaders, but we bring in our local partners that can give action steps. So I think that's really big for me is when I've gone to a lot of leadership conferences, they have the inspirational speaker, then you're like all fired up and ready to go. We want to make sure we're giving people action steps that they can take back home and implement and use to improve their relationships, whether at home, at work, in the community.
Awesome. Any other final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Total blank. But we'll add to follow us though on social media, Facebook and LinkedIn. We're both on both of those under MK Leadership.
Okay.
Hoping to add some more materials on both so that people can follow us. Mike is really active in the LinkedIn, so you can find him sharing information there. Yeah, I think for me, we're just looking at collaborating, and I think that's one of the reasons I fell in love with Blacksburg when we moved here is Blacksburg, Christiansburg. It's the whole NRV, Montgomery County. It's such a collaborative environment, very different from what we were finding up in the Northern Virginia region. And so we just love supporting and collaborating with other like-minded people. So we're looking forward to sharing more opportunities and helping people where we can, but just to live their best lives.
Yeah, I fully agree. That's part of the reason we decided to stay is just how collaborative things were here. One of the things that I got burnt out so hard in New York on is we would go into shows and the amount of ego that would come out from certain people. I remember distinctly we were in one show that was really, really struggling. Each particular lighting, sound, set, everybody needed some more time. And rather than pitching in and helping, we had some people that were like, yeah, no, I've got this 2 hours. No one else can be here. It's not, I don't care. And I left having this feeling of, even if your lights look incredible, if the sound and the set and everything else doesn't, it's still going to get a bad review. Yeah. People aren't going to respond correctly. And so when we moved here and we dove in, even seeing direct competitors helping one another through the chamber,
yes, exactly.
That was just the thing that really latched on.
Well, and and to add on to that, I think Sharon Scott was one of the first that took Mike under her wing when we got here. And so again, it was that it's not, we both are doing leadership and then you don't want to talk to one another. It was, how can we work together? And again, you go back to your working geniuses, or she has one niche, and then who are we speaking to if we have different audiences, and how can we work together on it? Yeah.
So shout out to Sharon.
Yeah,
a lot of shout outs in this episode. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. Thank you everybody for listening in. We will be back next week with a new episode. In the meantime, make sure you go out, invest, connect, engage, and prosper.